creating a community of lifelong learners.
Welcome to Teach Yourself series. This is Lesson 3 of Microsoft Excel. This course is for user to develop a competent skills in Excel. This course will teach you some important concepts in Excel. At the end of this course, you will be able to apply the knowledge and skills in practical manner. I hope you enjoy. Let's start the course. Welcome to Lesson 3. In this lesson we will cover the following topics. To begin with, we start with Introduction to Excel formulas and functions. Then we continue with logical and math functions. Next, we will cover lookup functions in Excel. Then on Section 4, we will discuss about Excel stats and text functions. Lastly, we end this lesson with date and time functions. Without further ado, now let's start with Introduction of Excel formulas and functions. Excel formula is one feature to perform numerical calculation. Similar like ordinary calculator, with Excel formula, you can perform addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. For example, performing addition the content of cell 1 and cell 2. On the other hand, Excel function is a predefined formula that performs specific calculations. For example, performing average, check the maximum value, minimum value of cell's content, etc. Excel includes many common functions to quickly perform calculation. Now, let's start with our exercise. The standard operators for formulas in Excel are the followings: plus sign for addition, minus sign for subtraction, asterisk for multiplication, forward slash for division, and caret for exponents. All Excel formulas must begin with an equals sign. Please also take note, Excel uses cell addresses to create formula. For example, column B and row 2, the cell address is called B2. In our simple exercise, we want to find the total value for cell B2 and B3. We could simply do the following. First, we select blank cell, in this case cell B4. Then type equal sign, and type B2 plus B3 and hit enter. Then we have total value on cell B4. If the value of cell B2 or B3 change, the value of cell B4 will also gets updated automatically. Now, to edit the formula, we could simply double-click the cell B4 and make changes. For example, instead B2, we could change to B1. As mentioned, we could also perform other mathematical operation. For example, we will perform subtraction of cell B2 against B1. First, we select cell B4, then type equal sign, and type B2 minus B1, and hit enter. Then we have value on cell B4. Now, let me show you how to copy and paste the formula. It is simply enough, by just selecting the cell that contains the formula, and then drag the plus sign down. Now the formula is copied to all selected cells. Now let's talk about Excel function. As mentioned earlier, Excel function is predefined formula. You can access Excel function by selecting the Formulas tab, as shown on the screen. We would use Excel function if Excel formula is too complicated to write manually. For example, we want to find the total value of column from cell B1 to B4. With formula, we would have to perform addition of cells from column B1 to B4. Instead, with function, we simply select the cell, in this case cell B1 to B4, then click Sum Function. If we compare function with formula, function uses specific syntax. In our example, it starts with equal sign, just like formula, then follows with function name, in this case function sum, then followed by arguments in parentheses, in our example, the starting and ending of cell range, which is cell B1 and B4. This concludes our introduction to Excel formulas and function. Logical functions are used in Excel to test whether condition is true or false. Either way, it will perform certain function or task. In simple example, if cell C2 is greater than 10, then return true, otherwise false. In this chapter, we pick up the following topics for discussion. And function, or function, not function, and if function. We introduced Excel math formula briefly in previous lesson, here we will cover in more detail. Because Excel math formula is an important feature. Excel math formulas are equations that perform various calculations. It is used to perform various arithmetic operations, like sum, average, count, max, etc. In this section, we will cover the following math functions topics: int function, mod function, rand function, round function, and sum function. Without further ado, let's start with our exercise. The and function returns true if all conditions are true, and returns false if any of the conditions are false. In our example, the and function in cell C2 returns true because cell A2 is true and cell B2 is true smaller than 60. In cell C3, it returns false because cell A3 and cell B3 is not smaller than 60. And in cell C4, it returns false because cell A4 is smaller than 60, and cell B4 is not smaller than 60. The or function returns true if any of the conditions are true, and returns false if all conditions are false. In our example, the or function in cell C2 returns true because cell A2 is true or cell B2 is true smaller than 60. In cell C3, it returns false because cell A3 or cell B3 is not smaller than 60. And in cell C4, it returns true because cell A4 is smaller than 60, or cell B4 is not smaller than 60. The not function changes true to false, and false to true. In our example, the or function in cell C2 returns true because cell A2 is true or cell B2 is true smaller than 60. Then not function changes to false. In cell C3, it returns false because cell A3 or cell B3 is not smaller than 60. Then not function changes to true. And in cell C4, it returns true because cell A4 is smaller than 60, or cell B4 is not smaller than 60. Then not function changes to false. The if function checks whether a condition is met, and returns the value, and another value if false. In our example, the if function in cell C2 returns fail because cell A2 is smaller than 60. In cell C3, it returns pass because cell A3 not smaller than 60. And in cell C4, it returns fail because cell A4 is smaller than 60. Now, let's talk about math function. The int or integer function rounds a number down to the nearest integer. If the number is negative, then numbers become more negative. The int function only chops off decimals from positive numbers. In our example, the int function in cell C2 rounded down number in cell A2 to 20. In cell C3, rounded down number in cell A3 to 80. And in cell C4, rounded down number in cell A4 to -41. The mod function returns the remainder after dividing one number by another. In our example, the mod function in cell C2 returns 2 as remainder after dividing 20 with number 3. Cell C3 returns 2 as remainder after dividing 80 in cell A3 with number 3. And in cell C4 returns 1 as remainder after dividing 40 in cell A4 with number 3. The rand function returns a random decimal number between 0 and 1. The rand function does not require any argument. For example, we select cell C2. And then we enter rand function and press enter. Then, it will generate a list of random numbers. The round function rounds a number to a specified number of digits. For example, the round function in cell C2 round a number to 3 decimal places. The round function in cell C3 round a number to 2 decimal places. And round function in cell C4 round a number to 1 decimal place. The sum function adds the numerical values in a range of cells, an entire column or non-contiguous cells. For example, the sum function in cell C2 sum the total number of cell range from cell A2 to cell A4. There are many other logical and math functions in Excel, which is beyond the scope of this tutorial. We suggest you to explore yourself. This concludes the discussion about logical and math functions. Excel lookup function performs match lookup of column or row range, then returns the corresponding value from another one column or one row range. It is commonly used for solving certain problems in Excel. VLOOKUP is one of the most popular functions in Excel. In this lesson, we will cover the following topics on lookup function: VLOOKUP function, HLOOKUP function, index function, match function, and offset function. Now, let's start with our exercise. The Excel VLOOKUP function is a function that makes Excel search for a certain value in a column in order to return a value from a different column in the same row. In our example, the VLOOKUP function in cell B10 performs search or lookup of value 101 in cell A10 from cell range A2 to C5 and returns the value of column 2 of same row of cell A2. In our second example, in cell B11, the VLOOKUP performs search of value 104 in cell A11 from cell range A2 to C5 and returns the value sport of column 2 of same row of cell A3. And in last example in cell B12, the VLOOKUP performs search of value 102 in cell A12 from cell range A2 to C5 and returns the value of science of column 2 of same row of cell A4. Please note, the Boolean false tells the VLOOKUP function to return an exact match. The Excel HLOOKUP function is similar to VLOOKUP, but perform in horizontal manner. The Excel HLOOKUP function is a function that search for a certain value in a row and return a value from a different row in the same column. In our example, the HLOOKUP function in cell B10, perform lookup, of value 101 in cell A10, from cell range B1 to E3, and returns the value of math, of second row of same column of cell B1. In second example, in cell B11, the HLOOKUP performs search, of value 104 in cell A11, from cell range B1 to E3, and returns the value sport, of row 2 of same column of cell E1. In last example in cell B12, the HLOOKUP performs search, of value 102 in cell A12, from cell range B1 to E3, and returns the value of science, of row 2 of same column of cell C1. Please note, the Boolean false tells the HLOOKUP function to return an exact match. The index function in Excel returns a specific value in a two-dimensional range. In our example, the index function in cell B10 returns the value science from cell range A2 to C5, because science is found at row 2 and column 2. In second example, the index function in cell B11 returns the value sport from cell range A2 to C5, because sport is found at row 4 and column 2. In third example, the index function in cell B12 returns the value art from cell range A2 to C5, because art is found at row 3 and column 2. Let's move on with next topic. The match function, the purpose is to returns the position of a value in a given range. In our example, in cell B10, math is found at row 2, thus it returns value 2. In second example, in cell B11, science is found at row 3, thus it returns value 3. In our last example, in cell B12, art is found at row 4, thus it returns value 4. Please note, the third argument is optional. In our case, we set this argument to 0, to return the position of the value, that is exactly equal to lookup value. The offset function in Excel, it returns a cell or range of cells, that is a specified number of rows and columns, from a cell or range of cells. In cell B10, it returns science, because it is found from range A2, which is 1 rows below, and 1 columns to the right. In cell B11, it returns art, because it is found from range A2, which is 2 rows below, and 1 columns to the right. And finally in cell B12, it returns sport, because it is found from range A2, which is 3 rows below, and 1 columns to the right. This concludes our discussion about lookup function in Excel. Excel has excellent tool for learning and executing statistical functions, which allows for a successful analytics career. In this section, we will cover the following stat functions: average function, count function, large function and small function, max function and min function. Excel text function is used to convert numbers to text. Where you want to display numbers in a more readable format, or you want to combine numbers with text or symbols. In this lesson we will cover the following text functions: left function and right function, mid function, proper function, upper function, find function and substitute function. Now, let's start with our exercise. The average function in Excel calculates the average group of numbers. It ignores logical values, empty cells, and cells that contain text. In our example, the average in cell B10 is 72.5, from range number C2 to C5. The count function is to count the number of cells that contain numbers. In first example in cell B10, the count function returns 4, because it found 4 numbers in cell range C2 to C5. In second example in cell B11, the count function returns 0, because it unable to find any numbers in range B2 to B5. In third example in cell B12, the count function returns 3, because it found 3 numbers in cell range A2 to A5. The large function is to find the largest number, based on criteria specified. In our example 1 in cell B10, it returns 90, because it found first largest number, from cell range C2 to C5. In our example 2 in cell B11, it returns 80, because it found second largest number, from cell range C2 to C5. In our example 3 in cell B12, it returns 70, because it found third largest number, from cell range C2 to C5. The small function is to find smallest number, based on criteria specified. In our first example, in cell B10, it returns 50, because it found first smallest number, from cell range C2 to C5. In our second example, which is cell B11, it returns 70, because it found second smallest number, from cell range C2 to C5. Lastly, in cell B12, it returns 80, because it found third smallest number, from cell range C2 to C5. Excel max function is to find the maximum value of cell range. In cell B10, in our example, the maximum value from cell C2 to C5 is 90. Min function is to find the minimum value. In cell B10, in our example, the minimum value from cell C2 to C5 is 50. Now, let's talk about text functions. Left function is to extract the leftmost characters from a string. In example 1, in cell B10, it returns MAT, it extracted leftmost 3 characters, in cell B2. In our second example, which is cell B11, it returns SCI, it extracted leftmost 3 characters, in cell B3. In example 3, in cell B12, it returns ART, it extracted leftmost 3 characters, in cell B4. Excel write function is to extract the rightmost characters from a string. In example 1, in cell B10, it returns ATH, it extracted rightmost 3 characters, in cell B2. In example 2, which is cell B11, it returns NCE, it extracted rightmost 3 characters, in cell B3. In example 3, in cell B12, it returns ORT, it extracted rightmost 3 characters, in cell B5. Excel mid function is to extract a substring, starting in the middle of a string. In example 1, in cell B10, it returns ATH, it start from position 2, and 3 characters, in cell B2. In example 2, which is cell B11, it returns CIE, it start from position 2, and 3 characters, in cell B3. In example 3, in cell B12, it returns POR, it start from position 2, and 3 characters, in cell B5. The proper function in Excel is to change the first letter of each word to uppercase, and all other letters to lowercase. In example 1, cell B10, it changed proper case for cell B2. In example 2, cell B11, it changed proper case for cell B3. In example 3, cell B12, it changed proper case for cell B4. Upper function is to change the case of text to uppercase. In example 1, cell B10, it changed all letters to uppercase for cell B2. In example 2, cell B11, it changed all letters to uppercase for cell B3. In example 3, cell B12, it changed all letters to uppercase for cell B4. Find function is to find the position of a substring in a string. In our example 1, cell B10, it found character O at position 9 in cell B2. In our next example 2, cell B11, it found character O at position 9 in cell B3. In example 3, cell B12, it found character O at position 10 in cell B4. The substitute function is to replace existing text with new text in a string. In our example 1, cell B10, it search for Smith and replace it with Stephen. In our next example 2, cell B11, it search for Peter and replace it with Patrick. In example 3, cell B12, it search for Celia and replace it with Susan. This concludes our discussion about stats and text function. This is the last chapter of lesson 3. This chapter will discuss about date and time function in Excel. The date function creates a valid date from individual year, month, and day components. The time function allows you to create a time with individual hour, minute, and second components. In this lesson, we pick up the following topics for discussion: day function, hour function, and minute function. Date function, today function, now function, weekday function, network days function, workday function. Now, let's start with our exercise. The day function is to get the day of a date. In our example, it returns the day as a result in cell C2. The hour function is to return the hour. In our example, it returns the hour as a result in cell C2. The minute function is to return minute. In our example, it returns the minute as a result. The date function on the screen is to add a number of years, months, and days. In our example, we add 2 years, 3 months, and 4 days in cell B2, and result in cell C2. The today function is to return today's date. In our example, it returns the current date as a result. The now function is to return the current date and time. In our example, it returns the current date and time as a result in cell C2. The weekday function is to returns a number, from 1 which is Sunday, to 7 Saturday, representing the day of the week of a date. In our example, the weekday function returns 6 in cell C2, because May 13, 2022, falls on Friday, which represented by number 6. The network days function is to returns the number of weekdays, excluding weekends between 2 dates range. In our example, it returns 10 in cell C2. Because there are 10 weekdays between May 1st and May 13th. The workday function returns the date before or after a specified number of weekdays, weekends excluded. In our example, the workday function returns the date May 13, 2022, which is 10 workdays after May 1, 2022. This wrapped up lesson 3. I hope you find the lesson is useful and inspiring, and will continue with the next lesson. Thank you, and have a nice day.